Shelley, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
We're thrilled that you're here. I would love to start off just hearing a little bit more about your background, place the conversation, make sure that people know your bio as we get into the conversation.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I describe myself as a retail warrior because I've been in the business since I've been 18 years old, if you can believe that. And I kind of spent part of my career running stores. So human resources, operations, merchandising at Bloomingdale's, Macy's, I Magnum, Bullock, Space and K Apothecary. I'm also a professor at FIT, Fashion Institute of Technology, and an adjunct professor at Syracuse University. I teach all things retail. And I think the most interesting part of my career, though, you'll find this really funny, Daniel, but I spent the last decade, really since 2011, helping retailers understand the role of analytics in physical retail space specifically, both in my own consulting business and also my 6 years at Retail Next. So I literally have spent almost 10 years convincing retailers that they need retail analytics.
That's amazing. I mean, it's a space that we obviously play in quite a bit. When you're convincing them that they need analytics, what finally resonates? What is it that really gets them to say, you are right, we got to do things a little bit differently?
Yeah, I mean, if you go back, back to 2011, that was a long time ago. Retail analytics, remember, was especially new in the physical retail space, not online. Online kind of understood analytics and used it a lot, but in the physical retail space, there was just so much data being collected. And I think retailers knew that they were supposed to be doing retail analytics and they wanted to do retail analytics. They just didn't know how and what. And so I think that convincing them was really not what I had to do, is to convince them about retail analytics. I had to explain the use case of how to use analytics, what to use it for, what decisions should be made, data-driven decisions. So I think it was more about explaining the connection between the data and the analytics and how that actually is going to drive profits, sales, or reduce expense.
Yeah, I love that. And a lot of retailers come to us and they say, we have so much data. It's sometimes too much data, but you're right. It's the analytics, it's understanding like actionable insights. How do you actually use that data when you're doing it? I'm curious, you've been in retail for so long. I also want to hear what's changed, but we'll get there in a second. I'm curious, when you talk about analytics and brands that have done it well, I don't know if there's some that you can point to or call out to say, yes, they are the golden standard. And then maybe others that have died along the way that we can talk about now because they no longer exist, that you saw not gravitating towards deepening their understanding of analytics and weaving it into their business model.
All right. Well, you'll know from me, and we've met a couple times. For me, I'm never going to call out a negative retailer. I'm never going to say anything negative about a retailer. But I can't talk about segments because I think retail business segments, I could easily talk about that. So if we look at some of the segments that are more challenged, I would definitely say department stores in general were more challenged with using analytics. And again, I'm talking physical space. They're very good at using CRM programs, right? So they did a great job building out their CRM programs, doing all kinds of analytics around, CRM. But when you look at the physical stores and kind of pulling the analytics from the stores, that was more of a challenge. Larger footprint, didn't know what to measure. And also when you look at department stores, there's a very structured hierarchy. So just getting things approved, getting money approved, getting everyone on the same page. It was very siloed, The merchants were doing one thing, the operators were doing something else. So I think they had a lot of challenges, and I still think department stores have a long way to go in terms of that. And if you look at, the discount sector, I'll use Target as an example. It's one of my favorite examples. If you go back to 2013, Target, they were dead last in any digital transformation of anything. They weren't doing anything in terms of this. Fast forward, they're now the leaders in using analytics and, putting into practice, collecting data, using data to make decisions. So, the discount sector went from really behind to way far ahead. And of course, the ones that are really the stellar ones at the top, who've always been at the top, a lot of them are the pure play digital players that then began opening stores. the Warby Parkers, the Allbirds, who started digital, they understood the analytics, and then now they just apply it to the physical retail stores.
Yep. I always think how they started D2C, right? So they knew their customers before they had stores, where everyone else is flipping that story and narrative around a little bit.
I think the other challenge with department stores is, they started brick and mortar. And so they have all these, really legacy systems. So in fairness, they had to do a lot of back of house kind of cleaning up and infrastructural changes to be able to even start to look at data analytics holistically.
Totally. When you started on this journey of explaining to companies why they should be using analytics, what was the initial pushback that you heard? Or what is it you hear now today as well?
Yeah, no, that's all right. So it was so funny. I just remember vividly in my first meetings with CFOs, senior vice presidents, head of stores, they all would look me straight in the face and say, I have so much data, I don't know what to do with it. Like, I don't even know what to do with it. And by the way, I'm trying to run a fleet of stores, so I don't even have time to look at the data. So I think the biggest pushback was there's so much data. How do I digest it? How do I make decisions from it? I'm trying to run a business here. And instead of saying, oh, I could use that to help run my business. I think that has changed over the past few years, obviously. Yeah. So that was kind of the pushback initially. I think now in terms of physical retail space, retailers are really just trying to figure out what it is we want to measure. You have some retailers that want to light up the store, so to speak, and measure everything in a store. I would never advise any retailer to do that. But we did have some retailers that just wanted to measure everything. And the other thing that's interesting, the pushback was, investments in technology. You had some retailers that would buy technology just to buy technology. I remember walking in a store once and, underneath the wrap station, behind the tissue paper in the back, I pulled out an iPad, I dusted it off, and I said to the associate, what is this? And they're like, I don't know. So, the retail exec said, let's send some iPads to the stores because that's what we should be doing to give them information so people can use QR codes and we can start using data in the stores, but no one told the associate. So I think that was kind of the early stages of the pushback.
That's super interesting. One of the big trends we're seeing now, especially post-pandemic, whatever that means, is a resurgence of the store. We're hearing a lot of CMOs, a lot of brands, they're saying, how do we get people back in, right? We work with property groups and malls that are saying, how do we get people back in to engage with us? And you think about the Home Depots of the world that you can drive up and they'll throw your products in the back of your car, right? Why do they have this square footage? Like, how do they use it in a better way? So we think about that as getting back into the store, engaging, driving loyalty, and also differentiation from e-commerce. But I'm curious what you see the role of experiences playing in retail analytics. Like, how does that play into that whole world?
Well, I think it's, it kind of goes back to your other question first, and then I'll talk about experiential. So when you ask me about pushback, part of the pushback is, what do I measure? How do I deploy it? What is it I'm looking for? So if you can answer those questions, what am I going to do with the data? What am I looking for? How do I measure it? And then you look at this experiential retail, right? I'll use 3 very different examples, okay, to kind of give your audience kind of a wide scale examples. So when you think about Target, Walmart, right, what they're looking for in experiential retail is a lot different than, let's say, Dick's House of Sports or a Sephora Ulta. Target, Walmart, they're looking for very seamless journey, easy, expedited. And so they're going to pull a lot of technologies and analytics to make sure that journey is very seamless. Okay, curbside pickup, buy online, pick up in store. It's all got to be connected, right? When you look at experiential retail in terms of Dick's House of Sports, what do I want to measure? I want to measure if people using the basketball hoops or people that are using the, golf stalls or, does that then translate into people spending more money? Are people going to be doing, adding on because they fell so in love with doing this experiential? So somehow connecting it back, like I said, sales, profit, or reducing expense, right?
Totally.
And the third example is, experiential retail and how you can educate the customer, get them more informed so they make better decisions. So if you look at Sephora and Ulta Beauty, they're really the stars in this, is the virtual makeup apps. Glam Lab, Ulta Beauty has Glam Lab, Sephora has their artificial intelligence and facial recognition. But if you can make, buying makeup online, in store easier through apps and using that data to then help inform you about future purchasing decisions, that's what retailers should be looking for, and that's what should be measured.
That's huge. Do you see, it's an interesting distinction from like the Targets of the world to the Dick's Sporting Goods, and I don't disagree. Do you see either opportunity or do you see a need down the line for the Targets of the world to have engagement within the store, like not just seamless experience, but like, I mean, I know that, they have some consultations there, they've got pharmacies in store. Like, do you foresee it going to the store of the future where maybe they have educational seminars or Targets become, community hubs where people can learn different skills? Curious your thoughts on that direction.
Yeah, I think they're going to go about it a little differently. And I absolutely think that is important, because I think consumers are looking for just more than transacting dollar for product. That's a key piece, totally. Right? So what else am I getting? So the community piece is important, learning a skill, but also, if you take a Walmart, for example, come summertime, which we're in now, people start camping. Walmart sells camps, but Walmart's not going to be able to put up 10 different tents on their floor space so customers can actually figure out which tent is right for them. But what they could do is they could employ some data and use artificial intelligence and a scan code and a QR code, and they could kind of give the feel of, here's kind of the sizing of the tent, here's what it looks like, that type of thing. So that would be really advantageous. And then Walmart can use those analytics to say, everyone's looking at the tent, but no one's buying it. Why is no one buying it? Let's figure out what's wrong. So they can use it to figure out what's not selling as well. It's easy to find out what's selling. It's more difficult to find out what's not selling.
100%. There's a question here, and I think you've touched on this, but this might be somebody just jumping into the conversation. Could you provide some examples of data analytics in retail? So maybe I'll change that conversation. When we're talking about data and analytics, like what are the big ones that you look for, you suggest that people measure and understand?
Yeah, I mean, so I think the most obvious one, and one that's used a lot, is the test and measure. So if you're going to be, for example, redoing a floor set, you want to see if we're going to spend the money and redo all these fixtures, is it really going to net out for more engagement, higher sales? And so you can do test and measure with fixturing. That's one part of data analytics that becomes very useful. We did a ton of test and measure when I was with Retail Next, where we would test, certain fixtures on a floor and then make decisions about that. Path to purchase in stores, I think, is an interesting one to measure. Where are consumers going? Where are they not going? Why are they not going to this part of the store? And I think the other interesting thing is with utilization of RFID is another great one is understanding, why things aren't selling. So like I mentioned earlier, it's easy to say, okay, the red dress is selling. It's always selling. It's a great seller. Okay, great. Just buy more red dresses. But the black one's not selling. But that doesn't mean all people don't like black. What it means is, what's wrong with the black dress? Is it being tried on? Well, if you had RFID, you would see that, oh my gosh, everyone's trying on the black dress, but no one's buying it. And you can go back and say, is it a fit? Did something happen with the scaling of sizes, whatever? There's a great story with Fabletics. They had a yoga pant that was a top selling yoga pant. It just flew out, but the petite size wasn't selling. So instead of just saying, oh, we have no petite customers, which is what, I mean, honestly, 20 years ago, we might've said that, oh, no one petite wants a white yoga pant or whatever. But what ended up happening was they found out that the petite style was being tried on, but it wasn't being sold. They pulled the pant, they looked at it, and there was an issue with scaling in the calf that made it uncomfortable when people tried it on. So they fixed it, and then it became a bestseller. So, you can use analytics in that way as well. So hopefully those are a couple good examples.
That's great. I'm curious, like, how have you seen brands, or do you have suggestions of looping in the analytics with maybe unstructured data or, qualitative data. I mean, that example, like they had to pull the pants and figure it out themselves. Like, is there a mechanism for getting that unstructured data from customers to kind of tie the why to what's actually happening?
Yeah. So what I would say about the unstructured data is, there's a lot of feedback reviews. So you get a lot of reviews, you get feedbacks on social media. So pulling that social media and pulling that, what's interesting about consumers today is they actually want to help product development. They want to tell you, hey, I'd buy the purse, but I want the strap 2 inches shorter. So brands that are saying, oh, wow, everyone wants a shorter strap, let's make a shorter strap, are the brands that are winning. The brands that are saying, they don't know what they're talking about, we're going to leave the strap the way it is. So I think listening to that feedback is really important because customers really want to help. Target did one of the smartest things I've seen in a long time in terms of listening to consumers. When they went to design their All in Motion brand, that is the active line for Target, they actually brought customers in to help design the line. So of course, when it went to market, it was a slam dunk. It made $1 billion in 1 year and was a home run. Why? Well, because customers helped design it. So I think that customer feedback is a great example of unstructured data that's difficult to kind of capture, but if you can capture it and utilize it and make decisions from it, it can really be a plus.
That's awesome. I love that. So I'm curious, different segments we're talking about, right? I'm curious, like beauty stands out in a lot of ways. You mentioned Sephora, you mentioned Ulta. Like, what are they doing differently that maybe other brands can learn from?
Well, I mean, they spend a lot of time on training. So when you go into the store, associates are very well trained on the product. I think that goes a long way in terms of keeping that engagement with the customer. I think the beauty brands also are very more forward about using technology to help consumers shop and make decisions. So I think that's another area where they're really good at. And they do a great job using the data that they are collecting to help inform them on future decisions. So I think beauty probably is one of the sectors of the business that would be at the top in terms of using data analytics.
That's awesome. One thing that we're seeing a lot more of too, for a host of reasons, is services, which is really interesting, where a physical retail space can be a moment of services. It's high margin, it can be scalable when done correctly, it's getting people in store. Sometimes it's also leading to a lot of customer acquisition, right? If you go into a store for, a specific service and you've never been there, but, they offer it. So, we're seeing, Michaels and Joanne and all these brands are doing like custom framing, for example, and getting people in. I'm curious what you're seeing the role of services and how it's being used well.
Yeah, I think services is really critical. Again, we want to do more than just exchange a dollar for product. We want to make sure that we're kind of building a community, a connection with the customers. Michael's is a great example. Hey, do a custom framing. So it teaches me how to frame. It then becomes a hobby. Then I buy more frames and then I have my friends framing, so you can kind of see the ROI there.
Yeah,
I think that's a great idea. Or teaching, they have painting workshops. They do parties where they do, help do parties where they do community things and help people paint and that type of thing. Home Depot's been doing DIY, workshops, which really exploded, obviously, during the pandemic.
Totally.
So that's another example of, teach them how to do it. And then, you're kind of creating that bond with them. And, even if you can like it, Golf Galaxy, and they do the customizing the club lengths. So, again, that's a great service. And if I can get, a couple more strokes off my swing, that's great. Restringing tennis rackets. So I definitely think there's a great need for services in the retail store environment. And I do think customers are super appreciative of those services too. It builds loyalty.
100%. I mean, we group that into that category of experiential because services, exactly, it drives loyalty, keeps you coming back. It builds your brand relationship. Absolutely. I feel like I have to ask, because everyone's talking about the metaverse. Like, metaverse means different things to many people, but I'm curious, how does that play into the retail world, Web3 in general? So like the metaverse, NFTs, digital goods. I'm curious your thoughts and who maybe should be playing in it, maybe who shouldn't be playing it, where it's going?
It's so interesting. First of all, I love the metaverse. I mean, I think a lot of retailers are trying to figure it out. They're trying to figure out, how's this going to work? What's going to be our role in the metaverse? The Gen Zs and the Gen Alphas, though, they get it. They were born in it. They get it. They're in it already. They're playing games in the metaverse. And there's definitely room for retail in there. I think it's a great avenue for brand introduction. So you have these, Gen Z and even alphas, alphas are 11 years old now. And, if they can get a Nike or Adidas shoe for their avatar, when they start working, they're going to buy the same, shoes from the same companies. So I think it's great for, introduction of brands. You may have, millennials or Gen Zs that can't afford a Gucci bag, but they can get a Gucci bag for their avatar, right? So it's like this alternate universe for people that they like to play. And so I definitely think from a branding perspective, it's a great way for brands to just get their brand out there. I think there's some challenges with the metaverse. Totally. And we recently did a podcast on the metaverse to kind of explain some of the, pros and cons. But, the biggest challenge I see is currency. Currency is a big, challenge. If you're going to be in the metaverse, you have to figure out the currency. And the other big challenge with the metaverse is they're all decentralized. So it's not one big metaverse. I think some people that may not be as familiar with the metaverse think there's one big metaverse, like a universe, and all people live in it. But the metaverse, there's different. They're all decentralized. So they operate different. They have different rules and different currencies. And so I kind of liken the metaverse to the early 90s when if I said to you, Daniel, hey, we're going to take a bunch of products and we're going to throw it on a computer and millions and billions of customers are going to buy from it, you'd say, oh my God, Shelley, you're crazy. Who's going to buy fashion items on a computer? No one's going to do it. That's what the analyst said. The analyst said, oh my gosh, fashion will never sell on the internet. It's going to be a big flop. Well, we know how that story ended.
It's still going. Well, I mean, it's interesting. I always think about this and people ask me all the time. I think that the metaverse as that concept of like a second life, if you think back when, I think that's not going to take off personally, right? I think that it's going to attract a certain demographic, but I personally don't, if I had to look into the crystal ball, I don't think that the next generation of people are going to sit there with AR headsets or VR headsets and just live in this like Matrix-like world. I do think, speaking of AR, I think there is this cross between reality and digital, right? And I'm curious if you've seen, and you mentioned the concept of Walmart having maybe AR for tents or products. I'm curious, the in-store use of virtual reality or the in-store use of augmented reality, where are you seeing that come to play? And do you think that'll even deepen as the metaverse expands?
Yeah, I think it's a bit more complicated. I haven't seen wide use cases of using kind of virtual reality in a physical store setting. I do think retailers could use it. I think it's more complicated than other elements that we've seen tested out in stores. You have to make sure that customers are wearing headsets. And so if that could be, if technology allows that to be a lot easier of a process. Right. There was the big talk about the Google glasses and how that was going to change everything, but that kind of flopped too. So I think there's a little more progress that needs to be made to make it easier to kind of integrate it into a shopping experience without, making it a major hassle for shoppers. But I do think when you look at the physical retail space, using different types of virtual reality is great. If you're, selling vacations, for example, send the customer on vacation. If you're trying to sell, rock climbing ventures or in REI, if you're trying to, talk about a new mountain bike and, sitting on the mountain bike isn't enough, take them on a journey. So I do think there's a lot of use cases for it. I just haven't seen it widely applied.
Right. I do think the technology is getting cheaper, more accessible, that there'll probably be a lot of innovation in the near future.
Definitely.
That's awesome. Any thoughts on NFTs now that we're talking about Web3?
NFTs, it's so interesting. My only thoughts are, I think it's a very complex it's very complex for retailers to kind of just adapt to. I know there's been a couple major retailers, Walmart being one, that already requested patents or trademarks for NFTs. So I think it's complex. I think the consumer is way behind in terms of understanding NFTs and how it works and what it means. So I think there's a lot more education from a consumer perspective that needs to take place, even for retailers, but consumers just aren't understanding the NFTs and how they work. But I do think it's great to have, digital assets that have a unique identifier to them. I mean, that's great. I mean, maybe that will cut down a lot on counterfeiting and, that type of thing. So there might be some great use cases for that as well.
Yeah, I'm a big believer that the best use case of NFTs hasn't actually been created yet, but I think there's a lot of technology companies that are working on it.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. All right, cool. We're going to get into some questions and answers. There's a few that people submitted and people are chatting in, which is great. This is from Steve Ryan. Are you familiar with Camp, the new experience toy store, mixing products and in-store activities? Any thoughts on this type of retail experiences?
I think it's fantastic. I think it's a great example of experiential retail. I think the stores are great. They're fun. They make an adventure. It can be a family event. So I definitely think it's a great example of experiential retail.
That's awesome. I love it as well. I think one of the big things is as brands get into experiential retail is having the analytics, right? I think there's a lot of brands that do it because it's good PR, right? Because people write about it. But ultimately, how do you know that it's going to, this region, this store, it's going to work for these kinds of demographics? And you don't unless you're really tying things together.
Right. And you're exactly right. You have to really cater it to the market. So I think the biggest challenge with stores like Camp is scaling, scaling it on a wide scale globally.
Absolutely. Great question, though. All right. This is from Cricket Lee. How are apparel assortment models created today?
Oh, interesting. So so there's a lot of companies that are smaller companies might use off the shelf, like a Blue Yonder type of assortment planning tool. But a lot of the major companies just create their own in-house tools. So it's really interesting. Amazon created I think it's pronounced Scott's. It's its own internal assortment planning device that kind of got them in trouble right now because it got too much inventory in Amazon right now, and they're over capacity, but that's for another webinar. So a lot of them build it in-house to help with assortment planning. I think the new thing to be aware of in terms of assortment models is that I haven't seen a lot of use cases of this yet, but what's coming is near real-time assortment distribution. So instead of doing assortment planning 6 months out or 6 weeks out, literally waiting right before customer purchasing to do your assortment distribution. And so that's a real game changer. So what you're doing is you're really kind of maximizing the success of selling styles because you're waiting to the last minute to actually assort it into the stores. And when I say, before the customer buys it, we're talking, weeks, not minutes.
Yeah. Awesome. Great. This is one from Todd Morgan. If you wanted a data analytics platform to build custom reports and information for BI and AI from data captured in store, who would you pick?
Well, first I would pick AnyRoad. That's obvious, right? But I think it really depends on what type of data is being captured. What type of custom reports are you looking for? How big is the company? So I think that it really would vary based on a lot of factors. I do think it's important that, whatever company is chosen, that it integrates with existing software that a company has, because you certainly don't want to recreate or reinvent the wheel. So I think if you were looking at companies, having a, spec sheet that says, here's our current software, here's what we're looking for, here's what we want to measure, here are the type reports, here are the people going to be looking at those reports, and here's what decisions we want to make from that. So I think it's going to vary widely.
Yeah, 100%. We see a lot of companies out there like duct taping, sticking things together and duct taping it and pinning it. And there's data leakage and it's siloed. And it's part of why we exist as a company, because I think it is a challenge, especially when it comes to like what's happening in the store, experiential retail that is changing and iterating. And you got to A/B test and optimize your way to success. All right, we got another one coming in. This is, let's see, from Jen Cameron. What data sets should retailers start with behind traffic? So if you're looking at traffic first, what else should they be measuring?
Yeah, I used to get this question all the time. What should I be measuring? And I would always answer retailers with, it depends, and I would sit and speak to the retailer, walk stores and say, tell me what's important about your business. What's important about your model. Tell me about your customer. Tell me about what you're looking for. So it's really going to depend on, what the company's overarching strategy is and what they're looking to, from a performance perspective, what they're looking to measure. So it's a tough question just to give a blanket, but some things I would definitely suggest would be, the A/B testing of fixturing before anything's implemented. If you have 3,000 stores, if you can figure out at 10 stores that fixture is not going to work, that's going to be a much better cost analysis on that one. And I also think that when you look at analytics, I think one of the key components is looking at, the total, like the shopper yield. So what's the opportunity for the overall shoppers in a store? How can we maximize what shoppers are doing in the store, how they're spending money, where they're spending time? So I think analytics around the shopping behaviors in a store are key. Just doing a few quick changes in a store could really equate to a lot of additional sales. That's so awesome. I know I didn't give you very specific things, but it does greatly varies based on the retailer and what it is that they're trying to measure.
Awesome. And I would imagine you consult on the side. So if people want to reach out, talk specifics with you, they absolutely can. This one's coming in from Waleed Rashid. This might be for me, but how can brands leverage AnyRoad in the context of existing digital experience platform investments? Waleed, it's without knowing all the details, AnyRoad wraps around a lot of consumer journeys built to drive loyalty or to drive sales. So we can chat with you about how to do that and understand a little bit more about what tools you're using. But again, per Shelley's comment, we don't want to sit in a silo. So a lot of brands are using AnyRoad to pull in data points from all these other existing touch points they have with consumers. So reach out to me, just Daniel at AnyRoad, and we can chat through the specifics. All right, I'm looking some more coming in. This is from Yvonne. My name is Yvonne. I'm the CEO of Bewilder. We're an immersive outdoor retailer to make shopping feel like an adventure. That's awesome. Thanks for hosting. My question, have you seen any good examples of how retailers are capturing customer data before they enter the store, how they sync it with the in-store experience, and what they do after they leave? This is a great question. I think Shelley and I probably both have thoughts from different angles, but do you want to start off?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, Retail Next, the technology exists where you can capture passerby traffic. So, and it's important to understand who's passing by the front and who's actually coming in and what percent of the customers that are passing by are actually coming into the store. So passerby traffic. We can also, at Retail Next, they measure, window effectiveness. So how effective are your visual windows? Are they pulling people in? Are they not pulling people in? So that's another kind of before they get to the store. And then after is, where are people shopping either before or after is important information. So if a lot of your customers go from your store to a competitor store or your store to a different store, you can do, different things with that. Like a lot of your customers go to a restaurant, you can then do some marketing, co-branding with the restaurant to get more customers from the restaurant to come into your store, things like that. So I think the before and after shopping of your store is important, as well as understanding what's happening outside your store front.
Absolutely. I'll add here at AnyRoad, we have an end-to-end platform. So what we're seeing is a lot of brands are doing a pre-registration for in-store experiences. So experiential retail is not just coming in anonymously. It's actually saying, yes, I'm going to be there at this time. I'm planning ahead, or walk-ups, but doing that data capture. And we think that's really important because, Yvonne, to your point, you want to know who these consumers are, right? Like if you are an outdoor retailer, you want to know, like, do they go backpacking a lot, or are they completely new to the outdoors, or like what experiences are they into? This will help navigate and understand what's resonating. And then, of course, the in-store experience, when there's a lot of ways to capture signals there. And then AnyRoad, we have a tool that's following up afterwards, right? Understanding how their brand perception has changed. And we can actually tie into sales from CDPs to understand what's actually driving sales lift and loyalty. So that's a great question. And I think that's exactly the right framework, I believe, in here at AnyRoad, that you got to look before what's happening in the experience and then after. The after, of course, understanding who's being impacted, be able to optimize that. Great question. Cool. Any other questions coming in? I was going to ask Shelley, we have a few more minutes. My question to wrap up, I don't believe you consider yourself a futurist, but you've seen where retail's come from. If you had to look in your crystal ball and say, this is what's going to happen in the next, let's do two things. Let's do the next 5 years, right? When pandemics, hopefully, knock on wood, over. And then maybe like 30 years, like kind of the next, like looking far into the future. Curious what you see in that crystal ball.
Okay, well, I'm happy to share with you in my crystal ball. So in the next 5 years, I think that, well, first of all, I'm going to tell you something that I've been saying for 30 years, and I was speaking about it for the past 20 years, and I will continue to speak about it. Brick and mortar is not dead, and it will never be dead. There is absolutely going to be physical retail space in 5 years and in 30 years. It's a social interaction. It's what people like to do, especially in the US market specifically, but in other markets as well. So physical retail is here to stay. And it is a big part of the story. I do think that, online may take more. Right now, it's about 15% of total sales. We see that going up. Will it ever be 80%? I don't know. I don't think so. As far as the in-store experience, I think retailers are really getting smart about using technology in a really smart, effective way. I think they're going to use analytics on a more broad scale. And I think, the pandemic, like many things, has really accelerated this synchronized strategy across all platforms. And I think we're really going to see the benefit of that over the next 5 years. These retailers are going to know a lot about their consumers' shopping behaviors, not just in different silos, in different channels of shopping, but they're going to really understand, here's our customer, here's what they like, here's what they don't like, very finite detail.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, going to happen. And then in 30 years, unlike you, Daniel, I think the metaverse is going to be something big. I really think it's going to be an area where retailers are going to use the metaverse. And in 30 years from now, you're going to be calling me up saying, I'm so sorry, I was wrong.
I'll own it if I'm wrong. But it's interesting. So you're saying that the metaverse will be big and physical will never be gone. So maybe there's some sort of like blending of the two, or
Definitely. Yeah. I think just like we have I hate the term omni-channel, but everyone knows omni-channel. So no one's come up with a better word yet. Right. But when we talk about the omni-channel experience, right now it's online, buy online, pick up in store, curbside, and the physical store. Well, 30 years from now, it's going to be all those things plus the metaverse. The metaverse is just another, channel of commerce that's going to be integrated with all the other elements that we're currently seeing of retailers.
That's interesting. We've got to now come up with a new term for omni-channel, maybe the extraverse or something like that.
Oh, I love it. Extraverse. That's
the
awesome.
Extraverse, coined here today. No, I mean, I agree, right? If it's omni-channel, it's happening everywhere. It's happening online. Maybe there's digital happening in store. Maybe there's some sort of physical happening, at home as well. That's super interesting. Awesome. Shelley, thank you so much for joining. This is wonderful. Really great conversation, really curious. And I will stay with it in 30 years. If I'm wrong, I'll go buy your drink as a consolation, but it'll be a digital drink, of course. So it'll be easy.
Thanks so much for having me. I really had a great time today. It's always fun talking and speaking retail with you.
Absolutely. Somebody's asking, how do you contact us? We will be following up. You're here, so you registered, so we can do that thing that we just said we were going to do because you booked it through AnyRoad. So we'll follow up with you after with the recording, as well as a way to contact both of us. Awesome. Thanks so much. Have a wonderful day. Cheers.